Hello, I'm Lyrian Gaylor-Baird, Mayor of Lincoln and fan of Greek literature and the UNL Classics Department. Welcome to Homerathon 2020, a Panhellenic plague production. What a suitable focus for this year's Homerathon, coming to you during an epic moment in all of our lives. Like you, I've so enjoyed our past gatherings on campus, from rosy-fingered dawn until dusk, reading the Iliad in its entirety. What a joy it is to see this tradition continue in new, innovative ways and in spite of our current circumstances. This year, we are reading just a small bit of the Iliad, along with some bonus passages from elsewhere in Greek literature that might help us gain perspective from antiquity on all that we're going through right now. Thank you to all of you participating in this annual epic tradition while staying home and staying safe.
Hi, I'm Professor Mike Littman of University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
I'm Professor Rachel Hart, also at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln.
So welcome to this year's Homerathon, Homerathon 2020, a Panhellenic pandemic performance. This year, instead of our normal reading of the Iliad or the Odyssey, we're going to be giving you a selection of performances or readings from Greek literature that are relevant to our current situation, as you just heard from the mayor. But I just want to give you a quick background of what the history of the Homerathon is and what our big picture is. So the Homerathon was begun when I was teaching at the University of Arizona in Tucson, student-run project, which was a 20-some-odd hour. It's not exactly 24-hour, we just pretend, but it's close enough to a 24-hour reading of first the Iliad and then the Odyssey. And then when I moved to University of Nebraska-Lincoln, we started it up again. So this would have been my fifth and the third here at UNL. And it is a student-run project that involves not only the students and the majors, but it also includes as much of the community as we can possibly bring in. So we have not only, do we invite other undergrads and other majors, we also include the community at large, the local politicians, as you saw. We bring in other high school students. We try to bring in local businesses who provide us not only with food and coffee, but useful advice as they work with the students on their pitches and whatnot. We work with the local media, and we do a general outreach. Last year, we had Jonathan Shea of Achilles in Vietnam fame come here. And after that, we started doing a reading group with veterans who had come to the Homerathon. So in general, we try to see the Homerathon as a large outreach project that is student run.
Absolutely. And with this being my first year at UNL, I've been very encouraged and inspired by seeing the students' enthusiasm for a project on this scale and all the work they've put into it, which is a large part of why we're still going forth and presenting something to you all, despite the fact that we can't do the usual event. So to kind of get us started, we are, as tradition suggests, starting with Homer. Almost all of what we know of Greek literature starts from Homer. As anyone in my myth class knows, we look back to Homer as the first Greek literature that we have existing for us today. Who is Homer? We have this tradition that Homer was a blind bard who traveled throughout the Mediterranean telling stories. And that's certainly part of it. We don't really know too much about Homer the person, if there is a Homer the person. We have these two poems that he wrote, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and we know there were other epic poems of a similar style, but these are really sort of our iconic texts, and because they're the earliest texts we have, almost everything else afterward looks back to it for inspiration, whether literary or the themes, and so it makes a good place to start, not only for a Homerathon-inspired project, but for any sort of compilation of considering works and texts from the ancient world. And that's really what the part of the goal of this project is these, again, as you heard from the mayor, these particular texts, all dealing with plagues, are of course in the minds of all of us now during a pandemic. And there are numerous pieces being released every week about interpreting the text and so on. But we here, our students, are really just trying to put the text out there and to present you the text themselves.
Okay, and so as some of you who have been to previous Homerathons know, one of my favorite jobs in running, when I say running, the student-run project, but in terms of hosting the Homerathon, is I get to be the guy who does previously on the Iliad. So I'm going to start us off with just a previously on the Iliad, but we're doing book one, so it's nothing. But I'm going to give you a quick introduction just of like what you're about to hear if you're not familiar with the Iliad or you need a reminder, and most of you should not need a reminder if you're a student. But in any event, let me just give you a quick background of what you need to do and why it's a different quite spin today. So anyway, 10 years into the Trojan War, you should in theory what a Trojan War is, Trojan horse and all that, and Paris and Helen and all the stuff you don't need to know, because book one is about the Iliad, which is about Achilles' anger. First word of the poem, as most of you know who have taken any classes with probably me and Professor Hart, is menin, which means a special kind of rage, or real serious rage. And it's about the menin of Achilles. So Achilles gets angry. And then the poem does not end with a Trojan horse. That's one of my favorite, quiz questions. No, Trojan horse doesn't really show up. The poem ends with Achilles kind of putting aside his meanness, his anger. And so we're going to do book one. And book one, in sum, so you know what it means and what to listen for today, here's book one in a nutshell. So things have been happening, and the war's been going on for some time, and Agamemnon has a captive woman. And priest comes, the father of this woman, and says, you should give her back. And Agamemnon says, no, even though he's in front of the whole army, and the army thinks he should have done it, but he doesn't. And then the priest prays to Apollo, god of both healing and plague. Well, see, plague. And then Apollo listens to the priest and rains down the plague on the entire Greek army. So they all suffer because of Agamemnon, the leader, who doesn't give back this girl. And then Achilles, who is the best fighter of the Greek army, quite reasonably says, this is nonsense. Man, we're all dying enough because of the war. Now we have to die because of the plague too? Come on. Things escalate. One thing leads to another. And then Agamemnon says, all right, Achilles, I'll give back the girl. I'll take yours. And then Achilles ends up by saying, oh, all right, forget it then. I'm out of here. Achilles out. This is kind of like drunk history, but it's early, and I'm not drunk yet. Really. No, really. Look, this is water. Okay? In any event, it could be in it. You don't know. But it is water. All right, the point is that Achilles leaves. That's book one of the Iliad. That's what you're about to hear. Now, here's why it is especially relevant, what with the word plague. And Achilles' real point is, look, man, I'm on the front lines. I'm taking all the risk. You're getting all the reward. That kind of echoes really well for me in a different way today. What with certain people who are taking all the risks in the pandemic? So I'm going to say Achilles right now sounds a lot to me like the guy at the grocery store. And if the guy at the grocery store is a little upset that he's not getting protections, I hear him. And he should hear Achilles.
Rage. Sing, goddess, Achilles' rage, black and murderous, that cost the Greeks incalculable pain, pitched countless souls of heroes into Hades' dark, and left their bodies to rot as feasts for dogs and birds, as Zeus's will was done. Begin with the clash between Agamemnon, the Greek warlord, and godlike Achilles. Which of the immortals set these two at each other's throats? Apollo, Zeus's son and Letos, offended by the warlord. Agamemnon had dishonored Chryses, Apollo's priest, so the gods struck the Greek camp with plague, and the soldiers were dying of it. Chryses had come to the Greek beachhead camp, hauling a fortune for his daughter's ransom. Displaying Apollo's sacral ribbons on a golden staff, he made a formal plea to the entire Greek army, but especially the commanders, Atreus' two sons. Sons of Atreus and Greek heroes all, may the gods on Olympus grant you plunder of Priam's city and a safe return home. But give me my daughter back, and accept this ransom out of respect for Zeus's son, Lord Apollo, who deals death from afar. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Respect the priest and take the ransom. But Agamemnon was not pleased and dismissed Chryses with a rough speech. Don't let me ever catch you, old man, by these ships again, skulking around now or sneaking back later. The god's staff and ribbons won't save you next time. The girl is mine, and she'll be an old woman in Argos before I let her go, working the loom in my house and coming to my bed, far from her homeland. Now clear out of here before you make me angry. The old man was afraid and did as he was told. He walked in silence along the whispering surf line, and when he had gone some distance, the priest prayed to Lord Apollo, son of silken-haired Leto. Hear me, Silver Bow, protector of Chryse, lord of holy Cilia, master of Tenedos, and Sminthean god of plague. If ever I've built a temple that pleased you, or burnt fat thigh bones of bulls and goats, grant me this prayer. Let the Danaans pay for my tears with your arrows. Apollo heard his prayer and descended Olympus's crags, pulsing with fury. Bow slung over one shoulder, the arrows rattling in their case on his back, as the angry god moved like night down the mountain. He settled near the ships and let loose an arrow. Reverberation from his silver bow hung in the air. He picked off the pack animals first, and the lean hounds, but then aimed his needle-tipped arrows at the men, and shot until the death fires crowded the beach.
9 days the god's arrows rained death on the camp. On the 10th day, Achilles called an assembly. Hera, the white-armed goddess, planted the thought in him, because she cared for the Greeks, and it pained her to see them dying. When the troops had all mustered, up stood the great runner Achilles, and said, "Well, Agamemnon, it looks as if we'd better give up and sail home, assuming any of us are left alive, if we have to fight both the war and this plague. But why not consult some prophet or priest or a dream interpreter, since dreams too come from Zeus, who could tell us why Apollo is so angry, if it's for a vow or a sacrifice he holds us at fault? Maybe he'd be willing to lift this plague from us if he savored the smoke from lambs and prime goats." Achilles had his say and sat down. Then uprose Calchas, son of Thestor, bird-reader supreme, who knew what is, what will be, and what has been. He had guided the Greek ships to Troy through the prophetic power Apollo had given him, and he spoke out now. "Achilles, beloved of Zeus, you want me to tell you about the rage of Lord Apollo, the Ark-destroyer, and I will tell you. But you have to promise me and swear you will support me and protect me in word and deed. I have a feeling I might offend a person of some authority among the Greeks. And you know how it is when a king is angry with an underling. He might swallow his temper for a day, but he holds it in his heart until later, and it all comes out. Will you guarantee my security?" Achilles, the great runner, responded, "Don't worry. Prophecy to the best of your knowledge. I swear by Apollo, to whom you pray when you revealed the gods' secrets to the Greeks, Calchas, that while I live and look upon this earth, no one will lay a hand on you here beside these hollow ships. No, not even Agamemnon, who boasts he is the best of the Achaeans." And Calchas, the perfect prophet, taking courage, "The god finds no fault with vow or sacrifice. It is for his priest, whom Agamemnon dishonored, and would not allow to ransom his daughter, that Apollo deals and will deal death from afar. He will not lift this foul plague from the Greeks until we return the dancing-eyed girl to her father, unransomed, unbought, and make formal sacrifice on Chryse. Only then might we appease the god." He finished speaking and sat down. Then uprose Atreus' son, the war-lord Agamemnon, furious, anger like twin black thunderheads seething in his lungs, and his eyes flickered with fire as he looked Calchas up and down and said, "You damn soothsayer, you've never given me a good omen yet. You take some kind of perverse pleasure in prophesying doom, don't you? Not a single favorable omen ever. Nothing good ever happens. And now you stand here uttering oracles before the Greeks, telling us that your great ballistic god is giving us all this trouble because I was unwilling to accept the ransom for Chryseis' daughter, but preferred instead to keep her in my tent. And why shouldn't I? I like her better than my wife Clytemnestra. She's no worse than her when it comes to looks, body, mind, or ability. Still, I'll give her back, if that's what's best. I don't want to see the army destroyed like this, but I want another prize ready for me right away. I'm not going to be the only Greek without a prize. It wouldn't be right. And you all see where mine is going.
And Achilles, strong, swift, and godlike. And where do you think, son of Atreus, you greedy glory hound, the magnanimous Greeks are going to get another prize for you? Do you think we have some kind of stockpile in reserve? Every town in the area has been sacked and the stuff all divided. You want the men to count it all back and redistribute it? All right, you give the girl back to the god. The army will repay you 3 and 4 times over, when and if Zeus allows us to rip Troy down to its foundations. The warlord Agamemnon responded, You may be a good man in a fight, Achilles, and look like a god, but don't try to put one over on me. It won't work. So while you have your prize, you want me to sit tight and do without? Give the girl back just like that? Now maybe, if the army, in a generous spirit, voted me some suitable prize of their own choice, something fair, but if it doesn't, I'll just go take something myself, your prize perhaps, or Ajax's, or Odysseus's, and whoever she belongs to, it'll stick in his throat. But we can think about that later. Right now, we launch a black ship on the bright salt water, get a crew aboard, load on 100 bulls, and have Chryseis aboard her too. My girl with her lovely cheeks. And we'll want a good man for captain, Ajax or Idomeneus or godlike Odysseus. Or maybe you, son of Peleus, our most formidable hero, to offer sacrifice and appease the arch-destroyer for us. Achilles looked him up and down and said, You shameless, profiteering excuse for a commander. How are you going to get any Greek warrior to follow you into battle again? You know, I don't have any quarrel with the Trojans. They didn't do anything to me to make me come over here and fight. Didn't run off my cattle or horses, or ruin my farmland back in Phthia. Not with all the shadowy mountains and moaning seas between. It's for you, dog-face, for your precious pleasure, and Menelaus' honor, that we came here. A fact you don't have the decency even to mention. And now you're threatening to take away the prize that I sweated for, and the Greeks gave me. I never get a prize equal to yours when the army captures one of the Trojan strongholds. No, I do all the dirty work with my own hands, and when the battle's over and we divide the loot, you get the lion's share, and I go back to the ships with some pitiful little thing. So worn out from fighting, I don't have the strength left even to complain. Well, I'm going back to Phthia now. Far better to head home with my curved ships than stay here, unhonored myself and piling up a fortune for you. The warlord Agamemnon responded, Go ahead and desert, if that's what you want. I'm not going to beg you to stay. There are plenty of others who will honor me, not least of all Zeus the counselor. To me, you're the most hateful king under heaven, a born troublemaker. You actually like fighting and war. If you're all that strong, it's just a gift from some god. So why don't you go home with your ships and lord it over your precious Myrmidons? I couldn't care less about you or your famous temper, but I'll tell you this. Since Phoebus Apollo is taking away my Chryseis, whom I'm sending back aboard ship with my friends, I'm coming to your hut and taking Briseis, your own beautiful prize, so that you will see just how much stronger I am than you, and the next person will wince at the thought of opposing me as an equal.
Achilles' chest was a rough knot of pain twisting around his heart. Should he draw the sharp sword that hung by his thigh, scatter the ranks and gut Agamemnon, or control his temper, repress his rage? He was mulling it over, inching the great sword from its sheath, when out of the blue Athena came, sent by the white-armed goddess Hera, who loved and watched over both men. She stood behind Achilles and grabbed his sandy hair, visible only to him. Not another soul saw her. Awestruck, Achilles turned around, recognizing Pallas Athena at once. It was her eyes, and words flew from his mouth like winging birds. Daughter of Zeus, why have you come here? To see Agamemnon's arrogance, no doubt. I'll tell you where I place my bets, goddess. Sudden death for this outrageous behavior. Athena's eyes glared through the sea salt's haze. I came to see if I could check this temper of yours, sent from heaven by the white-armed goddess Hera, who loves and watches over both of you men. Now come on, drop this quarrel, don't draw your sword. Tell him off instead. And I'll tell you, Achilles, how things will be. You're going to get 3 times as many magnificent gifts because of his arrogance. Just listen to us, and be patient. Achilles, the great runner, responded, When you two speak, goddess, a man has to listen, no matter how angry. It's better that way. Obey the gods, and they hear you when you pray. With that, he ground his heavy hand onto the silver hilt and pushed the great sword back into its sheath. Athena's speech had been well timed. She was on her way to Olympus by now, to the halls of Zeus and the other immortals, while Achilles tore into Agamemnon again. You bloated drunk with a dog's eyes and a rabbit's heart. You've never had the guts to buckle on armor in battle or come out with the best fighting Greeks on any campaign. Afraid to look death in the eye, Agamemnon? It's far more profitable to hang back in the army's rear, isn't it? Confiscating prizes from any Greek who talks back and bleeding your people dry. There's not a real man under your command, or this latest atrocity would be your last, son of Atreus. Now get this straight. I swear a formal oath. By this scepter, which will never sprout leaf or branch again since it was cut from its stalk in the mountains, which will bloom no more now that bronze has pared off leaf and bark, and which now the sons of the Greeks hold in their hands at council, upholding Zeus's laws, by this scepter I swear, when every last Greek desperately misses Achilles, your remorse won't do any good then, when Hector the man-killer swats you down like flies, and you will eat your heart out because you failed to honor the best Greek of all. Those were his words, and he slammed the scepter, studded with gold, to the ground and sat down.
Opposite him, Agamemnon fumed. Then Nestor stood up, sweet-worded Nestor, the orator from Pylos, with a voice high-toned and liquid as honey. He had seen 2 generations of men pass away in sandy Pylos and was now king in a third. He was full of goodwill in the speech he made. It's a sad day for Greece, a sad day. Priam and Priam's sons would be happy indeed, and the rest of the Trojans too, glad in their hearts, if they learned all this about you two fighting, our 2 best men in council and in battle. Now you listen to me, both of you. You are both younger than I am, and I've associated with men better than you, and they didn't treat me lightly. I've never seen men like those, and never will, the likes of Perithous and Dryas, a shepherd to his people, Caeneus and Exadius, and godlike Polyphemus, and Aegeus' son Theseus, who could have passed for a god, the strongest men who ever lived on earth, the strongest, and they fought with the strongest, with wild things from the mountains, and beat the daylights out of them. I was their companion, although I came from Pylos, from the ends of the earth. They sent for me themselves, and I held my own fighting with them. You couldn't find a mortal on earth who could fight with them now. And when I talked in council, they took my advice. So should you two now. Taking advice is a good thing. Agamemnon, for all your nobility, don't take his girl. Leave her be. The army originally gave her to him as a prize. Nor should you, son of Peleus, want to lock horns with the king. A scepter-holding king has honor beyond the rest of men, power and glory given by Zeus himself. You are stronger, and it is a goddess who bore you. But he is more powerful, since he rules over more. Son of Atreus, cease your anger, and I appeal personally to Achilles to control his temper, since he is, for all Greeks, a mighty bulwark in this evil war. And Agamemnon the warlord, yes, old man, everything you've said is absolutely right, but this man wants to be ahead of everyone else. He wants to rule over everyone, give orders to everyone, lord it over everyone, and he's not going to get away with it. If the gods eternal made him a spearman, does that mean they gave him permission to be insolent as well? And Achilles, breaking in on him, ha! And think of the names people would call me if I bowed and scraped every time you open your mouth. Try that on somebody else, but not on me. I'll tell you this, and you can stick it in your gut. I'm not going to put up a fight on account of the girl. You, all of you, gave her, and you can all take her back. But anything else of mine in my black sailing ship, you keep your goddamn hands off, you hear? Try it. Let everybody here see how fast your black blood boils up around my spear.
So it was a standoff. their battle of words, and the assembly beside the Greek ships dissolved. Achilles went back to the huts by his ships with Patroclus and his men. Agamemnon had a fast ship hauled down to the sea, picked 20 oarsmen, loaded on 100 bulls due to the gods, and had Chryseis' daughter, his fair-cheeked girl, go aboard also. Odysseus captained, and when they were all on board, the ship headed out to sea. On shore, Agamemnon ordered a purification. The troops scrubbed down and poured the filth into the sea. Then they sacrificed to Apollo oxen and goats by the hundreds on the barren shore. The smoky savor swirled up to the sky. That was the order of the day. But Agamemnon did not forget his spiteful threat against Achilles. He summoned Talthybius and Eurybates, faithful retainers who served as his heralds. "Go to the hut of Achilles, son of Peleus. Bring back the girl, fair-cheeked Briseis. If he won't give her up, I'll come myself with my men and take her, and freeze his heart cold." It was not the sort of mission a herald would relish. The pair trailed along the barren seashore until they came to the Myrmidons' ships and encampment. They found Achilles sitting outside his hut beside his black ship. He was not glad to see them. They stood respectfully silent in awe of this king, and it was Achilles who was moved to address them first. "Welcome, heralds, the gods' messengers and men. Come closer, you're not to blame. Agamemnon is, who sent you here for the girl Briseis. Patroclus, bring the girl out and give her to these gentlemen. You two are witnesses before the blessed gods, before mortal men and that hard-hearted king, if ever I'm needed to protect the others from being hacked to bits." His mind is murky with anger, and he doesn't have the sense to look ahead and behind to see how the Greeks might defend their ships. Thus Achilles. Patroclus obeyed, his beloved friend, and brought Briseis, cheeks flushed, out of the tent, and gave her to the heralds, who led her away. She went unwillingly. Then Achilles, in tears, withdrew from his friends and sat down far away on the foaming white seashore, staring out at the endless sea. Stretching out his hands, he prayed over and over to his beloved mother. "Mother, since you bore me for a short life only, Olympian Zeus was supposed to grant me honor. Well, he hasn't given me any at all. Agamemnon has taken away my prize and dishonored me." His voice, choked with tears, was heard by his mother as she sat in the sea depths beside her old father. She rose up from the white-capped sea like a mist, and settling herself beside her weeping child, she stroked him with her hand and talked to him. "Why are you crying, son? What's wrong? Don't keep it inside. Tell me so we'll both know."
And Achilles, with a deep groan, "You already know. What do I have to tell you? We went after Thebes, Aegean's sacred town, sacked it, and brought the plunder back here. The army divided everything up and chose for Agamemnon fair-cheeked Chryseis. My father, Chryses, priest of Apollo, came to our army's ships on the beachhead, hauling a fortune for his daughter's ransom. He displayed Apollo's sacral ribbons on a golden staff and made a formal plea to the entire Greek army, but especially the commanders, Atreus' 2 sons. You could hear the troops murmuring, 'Respect the priest and take the ransom.' But Agamemnon wouldn't hear of it and dismissed Chryses with a rough speech. The old man went back angry, and Apollo heard the beloved priest's prayer. He hit the Greeks hard, and the troops were falling over dead, the gods' arrows raining down all through the Greek camp. Our prophet told us they were to stir his will, and I demanded the god be appeased. Agamemnon got angry, stood up, and threatened me, and made good his threat. The high command sent the girl on a fast ship back to Chrysae with gifts for Apollo, and heralds led away my girl, Briseis, whom the army had given to me. Now you have to help me if you can. Go to Olympus and call in the debt that Zeus owes you. I remember often hearing you tell in my father's house how you alone managed of all the immortals to save Zeus's neck when the other Olympians wanted to bind him, Hera and Poseidon and Pallas Athena. You came and loosened him from his chains, and you lured to Olympus' summit the giant with 100 hands, whom the gods call Briareus, but men call Aegeum, stronger even than his own father Uranus, and he sat hulking in front of cloud-bagged Zeus, proud of his prowess and scared of all the gods who were trying to put the son of Cronos in chains. Remind Zeus of this. Sit holding his knees, see if he is willing to help the Trojans hem the Greeks in between the fleet and the sea. Once they start being killed, the Greeks may appreciate Agamemnon for what he is, and the wide-ruling son of Atreus will see what a fool he's been because he did not honor the best of all the fighting Achaeans."
And Thetis, now weeping herself, O my poor child, I bore you for sorrow, nursed you for grief. Why? You should be spending your time here by your ships, happily and untroubled by tears, since life is short for you, all too brief. Now you're destined for both an early death and misery beyond compare. It was for this I gave birth to you in your father's palace under an evil star. I'll go to snowbound Olympus, and I'll tell all this to the Lord of Lightning. I hope he listens. You stay here, though, beside your ships, and let the Greeks feel your spite. Withdraw completely from the war. Zeus left yesterday for the river Ocean, on his way to a feast with the Ethiopians. All the gods went with him. He'll return to Olympus 12 days from now, and I'll go to his bronze threshold and plead with him. I think I'll persuade him. And she left him there, angry and heartsick at being forced to give up the silken-waisted girl.
Meanwhile, Odysseus was putting in at Chryse with his sacred cargo on board. When they were well within the deep-water harbor, they furled the sail and stowed it in the ship's hold, slackened the forestays and lowered the mast, working quickly, then rowed her to a mooring where they dropped anchor and made the stern cables fast. The crew disembarked on the sea beach and unloaded the bowls for Apollo the archer. Then Chryse's daughter stepped off the sea-going vessel, and Odysseus led her to an altar and placed her in her father's hands, saying, Chryses, King Agamemnon has sent me here to return your child and offer to Phoebus formal sacrifice on behalf of the Greeks. So may we appease Lord Apollo, and may he lift the afflictions he has sent upon us. Chryses received his daughter tenderly. Moving quickly, they lined the 100 oxen round the massive altar, a glorious offering, washed their hands, and sprinkled on the victims sacrificial barley. On behalf of the Greeks, Chryses lifted his hands and prayed aloud. Hear me, Silverbow, protector of Chryse, lord of holy Scylla, master of Tenedos. As once before you heard my prayer, did me honor, and smote the Greeks mightily, so now also grant me this prayer. Lift the plague from the Greeks, and save them from death. Thus the old priest and Apollo heard him. After the prayers and the strewing of barley, they slaughtered and flayed the oxen, jointed the thigh bones, and wrapped them in a layer of fat with cuts of meat on top. The old man roasted them over charcoal and doused them with wine. Younger men stood by with 5-tined forks in their hands. When the thigh pieces were charred and they had tasted the tripe, they cut the rest into strips, skewered it on spits, and roasted it skillfully. When they were done and the feast was ready, feast they did, and no one lacked an equal share. When they had all had enough to eat and drink, the young men topped off the mixing bowls with wine and served it in goblets to all the guests. All day long, these young Greeks propitiated the god with dancing, singing to Apollo a paean as they danced, and the god was pleased. When the sun went down and darkness came on, they went to sleep by the ship's stern cables. Dawn came early, a palmetto of rose, time to make sail for the wide beachhead camp. They set up mast and spread the white canvas, and the following wind, sent by Apollo, boomed in the mainsail. An indigo wave hissed off the bow as the ship surged on, leaving a wake as she held on course through the billows. When they reached the beachhead, they hauled the black ship high on the sand and jammed in the long chocks. Then the crew scattered to their own huts and ships. All this time, Achilles, the son of Peleus, in the line of Zeus, nursed his anger. The great runner idle by his fleet's fast holes. He was not to be seen in council, that arena for glory, nor in combat. He sat tight in camp, consumed with grief, his great heart yearning for the battle cry and war.
12 days went by. Dawn. The gods returned to Olympus, Zeus at their head. Thetis did not forget her son's requests. She rose from the sea and up through the air to the great sky, and found Cronus's wide-seeing sun sitting in isolation on the highest peak of the rugged Olympic massif. She settled beside him and touched his knees with her left hand, his beard with her right, and made her plea to the Lord of Sky. Father Zeus, if I have ever helped you in word or deed among the immortals, grant me this prayer. Honor my son, doomed to die young and yet dishonored by King Agamemnon, who stole his prize, a personal affront. Do justice by him, Lord of Olympus. Give the Trojans the upper hand until the Greeks grant my son the honor he deserves. Zeus made no reply, but sat a long time in silence, clouds scudding around him. Thetis held fast to his knees and asked again, Give me a clear yes or no. Either nod in assent or refuse me. Why should you care if I know how negligible a goddess I am in your eyes? This provoked a troubled, gloomy response. This is disastrous. You're going to force me into conflict with Hera. I can just hear her now, cursing me and bawling me out. As it is, she already accuses me of favoring the Trojans. Please go back the way you came. Maybe Hera won't notice. I'll take care of this. And so you can have some peace of mind, I'll say yes to you by nodding my head, the ultimate pledge. Unambiguous, irreversible, and absolutely fulfilled, whatever I say yes to with a nod of my head. And the son of Kronos nodded. Black brows lowered, a glory of hair cascaded down from the Lord's immortal head, and the holy mountain trembled.
Their conference over, the two parted. The goddess dove into the deep sea from Olympus's snow glare, and Zeus went to his home. The gods all rose from their seats at their father's entrance. Not one dared watch him enter without standing to greet him. And so the god entered and took his high seat. But Hera had noticed his private conversation with Thetis, the silver-footed daughter of the old man of the sea, and flew at him with cutting words. Who was that you were scheming with just now? You just love devising secret plots behind my back, don't you? You can't bear to tell me what you're thinking, or you don't dare, never have, and never will. The father of gods and men answered, Hera, don't hope to know all my secret thoughts. It would strain your mind, even though you are my wife. What it is proper to hear, no one, human or divine, will hear before you. But what I wish to conceive apart from the other gods, don't pry into that. And Lady Hera, with her oxen eyes wide, oh my, the awesome son of Cronus has spoken. Pry? You know that I never pry, and you always cheerfully volunteer whatever information you please. It's just that I have this feeling that somehow the silver-footed daughter of the old man of the sea may have won you over. She was sitting beside you up there in the mists, and she did touch your knees, and I'm pretty sure that you agreed to honor Achilles and destroy Greeks by the thousands beside their ships. And Zeus, the master of cloud and storm, you witch! Your intuitions are always right, but what does it get you? Nothing, except that I like you less than ever, and so you're worse off. It's as you think it is. It's my business, not yours. So sit down and shut up and do as I say. You see these hands? All the gods on Olympus won't be able to help you if I ever lay them on you. Hera lost her nerve when she heard this. She sat down in silence, fear cramping her heart, and gloom settled over the gods and Zeus's hall. Hephaestus, the master artisan, broke the silence, out of concern for his ivory-armed mother. Oh, this is terrible! It's going to ruin us all! If you two quarrel like this over mortals, it's bound to affect us gods. There'll be no more pleasure in our feasts if we let things turn ugly. Mother, please, I don't have to tell you. You have to be pleasant to our father Zeus, so he won't be angry and ruin our feast. If the Lord of Lightning wants to blast us from our seats, he can. That's how much stronger he is. So apologize to him with silken soft words, and the Olympian in turn will be gracious to us. He whisked up a two-handled cup, offered it to his dear mother, and said to her, I know it's hard, mother, but you have to endure it. I don't want to see you getting beat up, and me unable to help you. The Olympian can be rough. Once before, when I tried to rescue you, he flipped me by my foot off our balcony. I fell all day, and came down when the sun did on the island of Lemnos, scarcely alive. The Sintians had to nurse me back to health. By the time he finished, the ivory-armed goddess was smiling at her son. She accepted the cup from him. Then the lame god turned serving boy, siphoning nectar from the mixing bowl and pouring the sweet liquor for all of the gods, who couldn't stop laughing at the sight of Hephaestus hustling through the halls. And so all day long until the sun went down, they feasted to their heart's content. Apollo playing beautiful melodies on the lyre, the muses singing responsively in lovely voices, and when the last gleams of sunset had faded, they turned in for the night, each to a house built by Hephaestus, the renowned master craftsman, the burly blacksmith with the soul of an artist. And the Lord of Lightning, Olympian Zeus, went to his bed, the bed he always slept in when sweet sleep overcame him. He climbed in and slept, next to golden-throned Hera.
Well, that was the Iliad Book 1. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, enjoyment. I hope you. No, you can enjoy it. It's good. I don't know if it's a laugh riot, but it was. I hope you are glad you listened to it. In any event, we're now going to jump ahead several hundred years to Greek tragedy in Athens. So one of the things I am fond of saying about Greek tragedy is that it's the pop culture of its day, and that doesn't mean it's light pop culture and it doesn't have any depth. I mean, it's no Tiger King, but it is something that everybody watched and everybody talked about, and it was something that you would relate to as the entire Athenian culture. All right. The other thing I wanted to say that's very important before you listen to the section we're giving you of Sophocles' Oedipus Tyrannus is that every single person in the audience would have known the basic plot points before they sat down. So when Oedipus comes on and says, "Hello, I'm Oedipus," you knew Oedipus, had sex with his mother, and you knew that he killed his father. Everybody knows this, except for Oedipus, who finds it out during the course of the play. All right. So the genius of Sophocles, the playwright, and Aristotle thinks this is one of the best plays ever, as you may or may not know. And I'm with Aristotle. He's a pretty smart guy. He knows what he's talking about. But in this version, one of the clever bits is that the entire story is compressed into this one play. So things like Oedipus actually killing his father happens, but only in flashback. People talk about it. And the riddle of the Sphinx, which you may or may not know, the answer is man. Anyway, that all happens in flashback, and we talk about it. But interestingly enough, and I think this is Sophocles' decision, it starts with, relevant to today, a plague. So listen, pay attention to that. And the common thread between what we're about to hear and what we just heard is that in both cases, everybody turns to the leader, in this case, Oedipus, and says, "We got a plague, deal with it." And that's what we're all doing right now. You, whoever you are listening to this, you're talking to or you're looking for guidance from your mayor or your governor or your president or whoever's in charge. And depending on how you feel about that person, you're like, fix this. Sounds very common from these Greek experiences. So, depending on how you feel about how that is, you're either happy or sad, but no matter what, it's on somebody's shoulders besides yours. And that is what you will hear in what you will now experience. So I bring you the beginning of the Oedipus.
We are before the royal house of Thebes. The great doors of the house stand upstage center. There are 2 wing entrances, one on stage left and one on stage right. There's a holy altar center stage. A throng of citizens have gathered there as suppliants. And then enter Oedipus through the great doors. "My children, new nurtured by old Thebes, why have you come here pleading, wearing wreaths and clutching boughs? The city burns with pungent spice. Healing hymns echo the sounds of suffering. To have heard such news from others would not have been right. My children, I am here, famous Oedipus. Old woman, it is your duty to speak for all. Why are you kneeling in supplication? What do you fear? What do you want? I will help. Only a heartless man could bear to see such sorrow and not feel pity.
Oedipus, master of my country, look. Every age gathers at your altar. Fledglings not yet fit to fly, elders bending beneath time, ministers of Zeus as I, and the flower of our youth. Your people cram the city's squares, crowding Athena's 2 temples, the river god's sacred shrine, and the blood-charred altar of the prophet, Look, see for yourself. The city is plunged headlong into depths of disaster, engulfed by a murderous, seething tide. Desolation wastes away the harvest, destroys our herds grazing in the fields, blights the women and makes them barren. Some furious god hurls pestilence and plague, draining the house of Cadmus as Hades bloats on dirges of death. We know that you are not a god. These children came to your hearth to plead to the man who knows best the trials of life, for you understand divine power. You came to Thebes, saved us from the Sphinx, and without any help, delivered us from despair. We could do nothing. We knew nothing. It is said that once you were helped by a god. We believed it, and you saved all our lives. Now, Oedipus, our master and greatest power, we are all in your care, and we beg of you, come to our aid. Have you heard from a god, a man? Is there something that you know? You understand what to do at such times, that is clear. All of us trust your judgment. Come, noblest of men, save the city. Come, be true to your fame. Our country calls you its savior. You earned the title. Let it never be remembered that you once raised us up, only to let us fall. You brought us lucky signs and good days. Now you need to do the same for us again. If you want to rule as master of this land, you need men to master, not walls and ships. A nation of no one can only be nothing.
My poor children. I understand the hope that brings you here. How could I not? I know you are all in pain. Every one of you feels it, but at least that pain is only yours. None of you can know the anguish that I feel. Sick to my soul, I grieve not only for myself, but for the whole city, for everyone, for you. You have not disturbed me. I could not sleep. These nights have seen me weep a flood of tears. My mind has wandered so many trails of thought, until at last my search sought out the one and only cure. I have already sent Creon, my own wife's brother, to the Pythian oracle, Apollo's shrine at Delphi. There he will learn the will of the gods, and what I must say or do that I might save the city. But he should have returned by now. Too much time has passed since he left. I fear what might have happened. Where can he be? When he does come, I would be worthless if I failed to do what is made apparent by the word of a god.
Well said, and timely too. These men say they have seen Creon.
Bless us, Lord Apollo. Let it be deliverance. Let good news shine bright in his eyes.
Good news, yes. Can you see him? He's wearing a thick, fresh laurel wreath. Good news.
Soon he will hear us, and then we'll know for sure. And then Creon enters from the left stage wing. Creon, royal brother, son of Thebes, what word have you brought from the god?
Good words. If fortune smiles, it will set these troubles straight.
Yes, certainly, but what of the oracle? Is there any hope? Have we anything to fear? Tell me.
Here, with all these people around us, if you wish. I'm ready to talk, or we can go inside.
Let everyone hear. I grieve for them far more than I do for myself.
Then hear the words I heard from the god. Lord Apollo has made his will clear. Drive out defilement nurtured in your land. Cherish it no longer. It must be purged.
How should we purge this curse? What is the cause?
The purge is banishment, or else death for death. The cause is murder, and blood guilt storms over our city.
Who is this man whose fate has been revealed?
We had a leader here whose name was Laius, before you came to steer our city straight.
I know. I've heard of him. though I never saw the man myself.
He's dead, and the command is clear. Punish the killers by force.
And where on this earth are they? Where can the faint track of this old blood crime be found?
On Theban soil, the god proclaims. Search leads to capture. What is ignored escapes.
But where was Laius murdered? In the palace? Out in the country? Or did it happen abroad?
He'd been abroad, seeking an oracle, they said. And he never came home from his journey.
Did anyone see it happen? Someone on the same journey? A messenger? A clue to solve this crime?
No, they all died, except one who fled in fear. But he said he saw only one thing for certain.
What was that? One thing could reveal much more. Hope can spring from such a small beginning.
A pack of thieves killed him in ambush. Not one man alone, but many.
How would a thief dare to do such a thing unless he had been paid off by someone here?
There were suspicions, but Laius was dead, and we had no one to help in our crisis.
Your ruler had been murdered. What crisis could have kept you from a complete investigation?
The Sphinx. Her riddles made us set aside that mystery. We had to deal with the task at hand.
Then I will start again. I will see it exposed. You're right. Apollo is fully justified to remind us of our obligations to the dead. Watch as I join the fight for this land as the god's true instrument of vengeance. I do not do this for some far-off cousin. I have my own reasons for driving out this infection. The killer, whoever it may be, could kill again and lay those deadly hands on me. As I serve this cause, so I serve myself. Now, quickly, my children, up off the steps. Take your bows of supplication and go. Call the people of Thebes to assemble here, and I will do everything. Apollo be with us. He will reveal our fortune or our fall.
Up, children, he has given his word that he will do all that we asked, and we have heard the oracle from Apollo. Come to our aid, Apollo, and save us from the sickness.
Exit Oedipus through the great doors. Exit Creon stage right. Exit the suppliants through the stage right wing. Enter now the chorus of Theban citizens from the stage right wing.
Be good to us, O word of Zeus. What is your meaning? Rich in gold, the prophet speaks to shining Thebes, but I am strung between fear and hope. Panic beats at my mind. Blessed healer to whom we cry, I await your answer with awe and dread. Will it be a new demand? Or will the passing years fulfill an ancient curse? Tell me, child of hope, golden, immortal word. Daughter of Zeus, I first call on you, immortal Athena, and on the earth holder, your sister Artemis, who is seated on her round throne, glorious in the center of Thebes, and on Apollo, who strikes from afar. Come, O you three protectors, let me see you now, if ever you have saved us, when disaster raged over the city. If ever you sent the flames of misery far away, come, save us now. Pain, misery beyond reckoning. My people, all my people, sick with plague. I search my mind for some defense, but there is none. No crops will grow, none from our fabled earth. No children crown the birth pangs of our women, but they cry out, one by one. You see them take bird wings and rise like flame on flame, unassailable in flight, to the dark shore of the Western God. Death, beyond the city's reckoning, beyond pity. Children lie on the ground unmourned, bearing death to the living, while wives and gray-haired mothers stream to the banks of altars, exhausted by their sadness, moaning, begging for relief. Hymns flash out to the healing God with cries of lamentation. Over us, we pray, golden daughter of Zeus, raise the bright face of your shield. Blazing Ares, god of war, comes against me now. With no bronze sword or shield, he scorches me, and the shouts rise about him. Turn him back, put him to flight out of our land. Give him a fair wind, either back to the broad lap of the Atlantic or back to the cruel surf of the Thracian Sea. For now, the horror left undone by night is finished in the day. Smite the war god, Father Zeus, for yours is the power of ultimate fire. Smash him with your thunderbolt. Lord of light, Apollo, lift your bow, I pray. Loose from its gold-spun string a shower of arrows irresistible, and send down also the radiant beams of Artemis, who sets the mountain peaks of Lycia shining in the night. And I call upon you, God of the golden crown, you who share your name with our land, Bacchus, glowing with wine and happy cries of maenads. Bring your torches of blazing pine and strike the god whom the gods detest.
And so there's the beginning of Sophocles' Oedipus Tyrannus. You can, of course, read the rest for yourself anytime. You should find the dramatic revelation of his storyline. But for now, we're going to continue around the same time period, same place, Athens. And we're going to move to a different genre of literature, to history, and historian Thucydides. He's not the earliest historian we have. The earliest historian we have is Herodotus, who wrote sort of a very broad scope of the whole world. But Thucydides chooses to write a very limited history, a history of the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. And what's interesting about this, what makes it kind of unique for its time, is that he's writing about events that he has lived through. So in many ways, he is a witness to what he's writing about, and that makes it a little more exciting and vivid in some way. And instead of looking at the beginning of the text, like we've been doing with others, we're going to swoop into book 2, and of course, look at his account of the Great Plague at Athens, which was obviously a broad-scale plague that really devastated the Athenian people and could be one of the things that weakened them for their eventual defeat. And linking it to these other texts that we've looked at, it also follows right upon a look to the leader of the time. It follows upon a speech from Pericles, who was leading Athens at the time that the Peloponnesian War started. And interestingly, Pericles himself ended up dying in this plague. So we get a grand funeral speech that he gives for many of those who have died in Athens. And then Thucydides moves on to tell us about the plague itself, about how it started in different places, no one's really sure, and it kind of creeps up among the people until it's overwhelming them. And it's an especially vivid passage and narrative to read right now, and to see a lot of the same concerns. There's not only that look to a leader for guidance, but in what Thucydides gives us, there's also a sort of look to community and sort of a question of, what do we do when we're so accustomed to finding stability in our social rights? We are going to hear about, how people had to adapt with funerals when you can't gather in large groups and come together for comfort. And it's very much about how the community itself responds and adapts and tries to get through what is an unprecedented and terrifying situation.
Not many days after their arrival in Attica, the plague first began to show itself among the Athenians. It was said that it had broken out in many places previously, in the neighborhood of Lemnos and elsewhere, but a pestilence of such extent and mortality was nowhere remembered. Neither were the physicians at first of any service, ignorant as they were of the proper way to treat it, but they died themselves the most thickly, as they visited the sick most often, nor did any human art succeed any better. Supplications in the temples, divinations, and so forth, were found equally futile, till the overwhelming nature of the disaster at last put a stop to them altogether.
It first began, it is said, in the parts of Ethiopia above Egypt, and thence descended into Egypt and Libya and into most of the king's country. Suddenly falling upon Athens, it first attacked the population in the Piraeus, which was the occasion of their saying that the Peloponnesians had poisoned the reservoirs, there being as yet no wells there, and afterwards appeared in the upper city, when the deaths became much more frequent. All speculation as to its origin and its causes, if causes can be found adequate to produce so great a disturbance, I leave to other writers, whether lay or professional. For myself, I shall simply set down its nature and explain the symptoms by which perhaps it may be recognized by the student, if it should ever break out again. This I can do better, as I had the disease myself, and I watched its operation in the case of others.
That year, then, is agreed to have been otherwise unprecedentedly free from sickness, and such few cases as occurred all turned into this. As a rule, however, there was no ostensible cause. But people in good health were all of a sudden attacked by violent heats in the head, and redness and inflammation in the eyes, the inward parts such as the throat or tongue becoming bloody and emitting an unnatural and fetid breath. These symptoms were followed by sneezing and hoarseness, after which the pains soon reached the chest and produced a hard cough. When it fixed in the stomach, it upset it, and discharges of bile of every kind named by physicians ensued, accompanied by very great distress. In most cases, also an ineffectual retching followed, producing violent spasms, which in some cases ceased soon after, in others much later. Externally, the body was not very hot to the touch, nor pale in its appearance, but reddish, livid, and breaking out into small pustules and ulcers. But internally it burned so that the patient could not bear to have on him clothing or linen, even of the very lightest description, or indeed to be otherwise than stark naked. What they would have liked best would have been to throw themselves into cold water, as indeed was done by some of the neglected sick, who plunged into the rain tanks in their agonies of unquenchable thirst, though it made no difference whether they drank little or much.
Besides this, the miserable feeling of not being able to rest or sleep never ceased to torment them. The body, meanwhile, did not waste away so long as the distemper was at its height, but held out to a marvel against its ravages, so that when they succumbed, as in most cases, on the 7th or 8th day, to the internal inflammation, they still had some strength left in them. But if they passed this stage, and the disease descended further into the bowels, inducing violent ulceration there, accompanied by severe diarrhea, this brought on weakness, which was generally fatal. For the disorder first settled in the head, ran its course from thence through the whole of the body, and even where it did not prove mortal, it still left its mark on the extremities. for it settled in the privy parts, the fingers, and the toes, and many escaped with the loss of these, some too with that of their eyes. Others, again, were seized with entire loss of memory on their first recovery, and did not know either themselves or their friends. But while the nature of the distemper was such as to baffle all description, and its attacks almost too grievous for human nature to endure, it was still in the following circumstance that its difference from all ordinary disorders was most clearly shown. All the birds and the beasts that prey upon human bodies either abstained from touching them, though there were many lying unburied, or died after tasting them. In proof of this, it was noticed that birds of this kind actually disappeared. They were not about the bodies, or indeed to be seen at all. But of course, the effects which I have mentioned could best be studied in the domestic animal like the dog.
Such then, if we pass over the varieties of particular cases, which were many and peculiar, were the general features of the distemper. Meanwhile, the city enjoyed an immunity from all the ordinary disorders, or if any case occurred, it ended in this. Some died in neglect, others in the midst of every attention. No remedy was found that could be used as a specific, for what did good in one case did harm in another. Strong and weak constitutions proved equally incapable of resistance, all alike being swept away, although dieted with the utmost precaution. By far the most terrible feature in the malady was the dejection which ensued when anyone felt himself sickening, for the despair into which they instantly fell took away their power of resistance, and left them a much easier prey to the disorder, besides which, there was the awful spectacle of men dying like sheep, through having caught the infection and nursing each other. This caused the greatest mortality. On the one hand, if they were afraid to visit each other, they perished from neglect. Indeed, many houses were emptied of their inmates for want of a nurse. On the other, if they ventured to do so, death was the consequence. This was especially the case with such as made any pretensions to goodness. Honor made them unsparing of themselves and their attendants in their friends' houses, where even the members of the family were at last worn out by the moans of the dying, and succumbed to the force of the disaster. Yet it was with those who had recovered from the disease that the sick and the dying found most compassion. These knew what it was from experience, and had now no fear for themselves. For the same man was never attacked twice, never at least fatally. And such persons not only received the congratulations of others, but themselves also, in the elation of the moment, half entertained the vain hope that they were for the future safe from any disease whatsoever.
An aggravation of the existing calamity was the influx from the country into the city, and this was especially felt by the new arrivals. As there were no houses to receive them, they had to be lodged at the hot season of the year in stifling cabins, where the mortality raged without restraint. The bodies of dying men lay one upon the other, and half-dead creatures reeled about the streets and gathered round all the fountains in their longing for water. The sacred places also in which they had quartered themselves were full of corpses of persons that had died there, just as they were, for as the disaster passed all bounds, men, not knowing what was to become of them, became utterly careless of everything, whether sacred or profane. All the burial rites before in use were entirely upset, and they buried the bodies as best they could. Many, from want of the proper appliances, through so many of their friends having died already, had recourse to the most shameless modes of burial. Sometimes getting in first, before those who had raised a pile, they threw their own dead body upon the stranger's pyre and ignited it. Sometimes they tossed the corpse which they were carrying on the top of another that was burning, and so went off. Nor was this the only form of lawless extravagance which owed its origin to the plague. Men now did just what they pleased, coolly venturing on what they had formerly done, only in a corner, seeing the rapid transitions produced by persons in prosperity suddenly dying, and those who before had nothing succeeding to their property.
So they resolved to spend quickly and enjoy themselves, regarding both their lives and their property alike as things of a day. Perseverance in what men called honor was popular with none. It was so uncertain whether they would be spared to obtain the object. But it was settled that present enjoyment,
and all that contributed to it was both honorable and useful. Fear of gods or law of man, there was none to restrain them. As for the first, they judged it to be just the same whether they worshipped them or not, is, they saw all alike perishing. And for the last, no one expected to live to be brought to trial for his offenses. But each felt that a far severer sentence had already passed upon them all, and hung ever over their heads. And before this fell, it was only reasonable to enjoy life a little.
Such was the nature of the calamity, and heavily did it weigh on the Athenians, death raging within the city, and devastation without. Among other things which they remembered in their distress was, very naturally, the following verse which the old men said had long ago been uttered: "A Dorian war shall come, and with it pestilence."
And that was Thucydides' narrative of the plague. And you can see why we and our students, a very broad we, chose to kind of bring these two texts together. They are not just because they're about plagues, but because they really are examining a lot of the same things we are. But at the same time, we wanted to just present you the texts. We don't want to give you any sort of single definitive interpretation of what they are. Part of the fun of classics, of studying text, is that you can read into it and interpret it almost any way you want. And that's what's exciting about it. So we here just kind of wanted to wrap ourselves in the words themselves. What did these ancient authors say? And the rest of it is up to you.
All right, well, I guess there's your Panhellenic pandemic performance. And I want to emphasize as much as possible that we are all sorry we couldn't have done what our original intention was, which, because the students worked very hard, and this is a year-long work that we put in, a year-long of working that we put into this. But we're really glad we could do something, and something that we hope speaks very well to your experience, which, as Professor Hart just said, this is why we read this stuff. I mean, you know, I think is always relevant, but now it kind of punches pretty hard, I think. Or at least that was what we all talked about when we were putting this together. The Iliad always hits hard. We're always pissed off. We're more pissed off now than we've ever been. But certain parts are hitting us a little bit harder. And yeah, listening to Thucydides now, I think to myself, oh my God, he was right. It is a monument to last all time. And you should catch that reference, some of you. In any event, I just want to thank you guys all for being part of this. You students from past to present, and I know some of you who are going to listen to this are past. You're the grandmother and father of this. Good on you. Lives on. Those of you guys who are listening to this who are the literal grandmothers and grandfathers of the people who do this, thanks. Those of you guys who are listening to this who are just random people in the world, this is why we do this stuff. So we really appreciate it, and we appreciate you guys being a part of it, and we hope we're bringing you some perspective in the big picture. I mean, that's thus liberal arts, and thus, at least from our point of view, classics, all right? For everyone. Panhellenic, pandemic, everyone learning to Greek. All right, so with that, we look forward to seeing you guys next year, Homerathon 2021. Hopefully, do you know it snowed when it was supposed to, we were supposed to be outside, and it snowed. What the hell? All right, anyway, next year, hopefully in the sunshine, Homerathon 2021. We're going to do the Iliad. It seems like the right thing to do. And every single one of you who hears this video, I'll see you there.
Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you have enjoyed our Homerathon Panhellenic pandemic performances. Even though this project was born because of the cancellation of the Homerathon and the COVID-19 crisis, I'm extremely proud of what we have done here and to be its student organizer. It is vital during these times to both look back on history and to band together, and I think we have accomplished that with this project. I would like to give a big thank you to all of our student, faculty, and community participants who read and performed, and to both the UNL community and the Mill Coffee and Tea for their support of the Homerathon in all of its forms. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Cameron Ramsey and Ellen Kratzer for putting the technology together that made this whole thing possible. And a special thanks as well to the previous Homerathon leaders Nicole Brady and Brooke Mott for their support and their tutelage. Thank you all again so much. Be safe, be well.